So today we're going to be going over unit setup, how to create and edit a unit setup. So we're going to talk about the Micromate, and there's multiple ways to add a unit setup. You can import a setup from an existing unit, or you can just create a new one. If you click the unit setup icon on the unit tab, you can either right click in the setup files area and do a new unit setup file, or you can click the add button to add a new setup. So you'll give it a name, a description. Your unit type is going to be Micromate. You can also choose Minimate Pro, but today we're going to do the Micromate. You can set your recording mode. Typically for applications like blasting, you would use a waveform mode. If you were going to do a manual recording, you can do a waveform manual. So that's where the user will manually trigger the geophone. And you also have histogram, which I would recommend for background monitoring, or histogram combo for most construction type monitoring. Histogram interval, I would recommend using a 1-minute interval. Record stop mode is fixed or auto, and that just depends on what vibration source you're monitoring. You can also set a pre-trigger recording time. You can set a sample rate from 1024 to 4096. And then your fixed record time is going to be this top number. And you can auto stop after a certain amount of time if you're using the auto stop mode. The second section is unit setup, and you can set the sensor check for before monitoring, after each event, or disabled. I would typically recommend using before monitoring. You can set your measurement units for imperial or metric, your time format to 24-hour or 12-hour clock. And then the section here, you can change the channel names if you so wanted to. I would recommend leaving them as they are. If you wanted to use a job number, you can enable the job number. If you want to use a GPS to put a GPS stamp on the record, this is typically not used unless you have specific GPS that can interface with the Micromate. Or if you're going to use scale distance, you can enable scale distance and enter the scale distance information. There's a few other options here for microphone channel name and to show the microphone peaks in linear decibels. If you're using if your Micromate has an auxiliary port and you're using the auxiliary mode, you can use that as an external trigger or a remote alarm. Then to add sensors, you're typically going to add at least a geophone, and you can enable the trigger level and enter a trigger level value. If you're using an external remote alarm, you can set the alarm level for that. If you're using a microphone, either a sound level microphone or a linear microphone, you can additionally add that sensor as well. Or you can just use a geophone. Any user notes are optional, and then there's some pre-designated fields here where you can enter your user notes. Then you click OK to save changes, and then that's going to be saved in the setup files database here. To edit this, there's two ways to edit. You can either right click and edit this setup, or you can click the edit setup button. So to edit, it just allows you to come back in, make any changes that you want, and then you would click OK to save. If you need to delete a setup file, you could just right click on that and click delete, or you can click the little trash can icon for deleting. You can also make a copy, and it will just make an exact copy of the setup file, and then you can edit that and create a new setup file that incorporates settings that you had in your original setup file. Okay, so that concludes this section for unit setup.